On the night of our 7th wedding anniversary, my wife disappeared. No note, no goodbye, and when I found out why, my world collapsed. Chicago City. An October evening, colder than usual. I booked a table at the most expensive restaurant in the West Loop and prepared the gift I'd been hunting for 3 months, an antique compass to commemorate our first hike together. Everything was perfect, except she didn't come, and from that moment I began to overturn everything I once believed about her, this marriage, and myself. Dominic Harper adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, then peered into the restaurant's glass window as if hoping to see something else. A little hope. Tonight marked their 7th wedding anniversary, and he knew it deserved more than a simple dinner. So he booked a table a month in advance at Eclipse, the most expensive restaurant in the western part of the city, Chicago. Warm yellow light fell on the white tablecloths, creating the perfect scene for couples whispering together, sharing laughter, or the words of love Dominic thought he would hear tonight. He looked at his watch again, 8:27 p.m. Alyssa was almost an hour late. A waiter approached with a forced smile. "Would you like some more wine while you wait?" "Mr. Harper?" Dominic nodded, even though his stomach had long been churning with a vague, and then slowly becoming clear, worry. He left 3 voice messages. Send 5 text messages, no response. Every minute that passed was like a countdown clock in his heart. By Alyssa is not the type of person to miss an appointment, much less not leave a word. Their marriage hasn't always been smooth sailing, but who hasn't had its share of bumpy times? They have overcome many ups and downs, since the night 8 years ago when they first met at a charity gala. At that moment, Alyssa walked up to him without hesitation and bluntly said that his donation sounded like a show. Dominic was confused, but it was that straightforwardness that attracted him. From there, they build a relationship based on sincerity and respect. He runs a sustainable architecture company, and Alyssa is an environmental lawyer. They were once called the Golden Couple in the construction and legal world in Singapore, Illinois. But in the small house on Wicker Park Street, they were just Dominic and Alyssa, 2 people who thought they had found their other half. "She won't come," Dominic muttered, his voice so quiet he could barely hear himself. The clock ticks 9 p.m. The surrounding tables were bustling with laughter, but his table still only had a glass of wine that hadn't touched his lips and a small box lying quietly in his coat pocket. The gift he spent a whole month looking for, a classic compass, symbolizes their first mountain climbing trip, where love blossomed. He was about to stand up when another waitress, a strange young girl, walked over holding a white envelope. "A man out there asked me to give this to you," she said quickly and turned away. Dominic opened the envelope. Inside was a white card with the following scribbled text: "Your wife is not missing. She is on the run. Ask yourself why." And a minor key. Same blurry photo. His heart stopped beating when he recognized Alyssa in the photo, entering a motel with a tall man whose face was hidden from the frame. Date taken yesterday. Dominic put the cash on the table, clutched the envelope, and left the restaurant. There are no more flowers left, no more glasses of wine. There were no more memorable 7-year memories. Only the cold wind hitting his face, and as if to make sure. This is not a dream. The phone vibrates. Nolan, a longtime collaborator and close friend since college. "Dom, you have to go to the office now." Nolan's voice was filled with panic. "There's something big going on. The FBI just came in. They have a warrant to search the entire system, saying Alyssa stole the blueprints and sold them to real estate developers, related to organized crime." Dominic was dumbfounded. Who? Alyssa? They said she broke in and took the blueprints for projects related to federal buildings. There was also energy technology surveillance. No way. Not Alyssa. But even though his mouth protested, his mind flipped through a series of recent memories. The times Alyssa said she had to go to his office to secretly make a souvenir. The nights she came home late, tired, but smiled wryly and said that it was just preparing legal documents. Could it be? Dominic looked down at his palm, where the minor key remained motionless. An address when the card is Premier Storage, Unit 318, Addison, IL. He drove in silence, no music, no lights in the car. Just the sound of the engine echoing in his confused mind. The storage facility is located on the outskirts of Chicago, with no cameras and no security guards. Perfect for those who want to keep things out of sight. Door number 3118 opens. Inside, 3 plastic crates, an old laptop, and a disposable phone. The first box contains cash. Lots, neatly in $100 piles. The second one was a bigger shock, many different ID cards, same photo of Alyssa, but the name was changed. Melissa Grant, Sarah Huxley, Emily Rhodes. The last box made Dominic shiver, a file tracking yourself. Daily schedule. Office diagram. Psychological information. Even the personality test results he once took out of curiosity. Everything is noted down in detail like a goal. The phone rang. A message. "That's not the place for you. She made a mistake. You're in danger. Meet me at the Phoenix Diner, midnight." Dominic left the warehouse, his head pounding and his mind a mess. 7 years of marriage. And now he doesn't know who his wife is. An environmental lawyer or just a cover. Near midnight, Dominic arrived at Phoenix Diner, a 24/7 diner hidden in the middle of the town of Addison. Dim neon lights shine through the steam-stained glass. A woman is sitting in the back corner. Copper-red hair, sharp but cautious eyes. "Are you Dominic?" she asked, needing no introduction. "Who are you, Brooke Winters?" "I used to work with Alyssa," she said quickly, her voice low but firm. "Not at a law firm, in her real place." Dominic tightened his coat straps. "What do you mean? We work in an information extraction department, under government supervision, but not everyone is transparent. Alyssa was recruited 5 years ago. Her mission approach, you use her connections to get a design with national security value." Dominic stiffened. "You are crazy." Brooke shook her head. "Alyssa loves you. That wasn't part of the plan. But because she loves you, you're both being hunted now." "She loves me," Dominic repeated, not sure if he was asking the other person or just trying to hold on to a particular idea for himself. All the beautiful memories suddenly became distorted like a reversed movie in his mind. Brooke didn't avoid his eyes. Initially, her mission was simple approach, you get the blueprints with sensitive national elements, then withdraw. But she didn't withdraw. She paused, momentarily, then said slowly, "She chose to stay for you." Dominic's whole body seemed to fall into space. The picnics, the nights they lied down and talked until late the ring, Alyssa hid in a blueberry pie when she proposed back to him. Was it all real? Or is it just a shell built by a woman who never really belonged to the life he thought was real? But just as he was drifting in the maze of doubt, Brooke pulled him back to reality with a sentence colder than the night wind outside. "Silas Preston is hunting both of you. She did not complete the mission, and you, now the most dangerous person involved." Dominic clutched a cup of coffee that he had never taken a sip of. Why didn't she say anything? Why did she leave me in the middle of this fire? Brooke leaned over, pulled out a black phone and placed it on the table. Because she chose to protect you, chose to make you angry rather than afraid. Don't you know? Angry people are cautious while worried people are reckless. She knows if you know the truth you won't let go, and then both of you will be caught. Before Dominic could react, a slight movement at the counter made them both stop a man whose eyes were too focused on them. Brooke only glanced for a second, then stood up. "We have to get out of here. Now." Chaos broke out just minutes later. As Dominic and Brooke ran to the back of the diner, gunshots ripped through the night. Car glass shattered. Dominic pushed Brooke behind a large trash can. "Do you have a gun?" he asked, his voice strangely calm. "No," Brooke gasped, "but I do. 3 years in the Marines. Alyssa once said if everything falls apart, I'm the only one who can save myself." A Glock was shoved into his hand. Dominic's hand trembled slightly, not because of fear, but because this feeling was familiar. His first shot hit the leg of one of the two pursuers. He fell down, screaming. Dominic pulled Brooke into the passenger seat as the car sped off onto the deserted highway. "Where are we going?" he asked, his eyes never leaving the rearview mirror. "Cabin in Elburn. The only place I never told Alyssa about, but wrote it down in my offline schedule." Dominic turned sharply. "How do you know that Brooke didn't look at him?" "Because I used to follow you too, before I chose to side with her." The cabin appeared behind the dense pine trees, small, silent, utterly separate from the world. Dominic once called this place a pause point in life. A place where he escaped from noise, petty arguments, and even questions he was not ready to answer. But today, right in the place he thought was the safest, he found himself more lost than ever. He sat down on the wooden chair in front of the window, looking out at the quiet night. In his pocket, the black burner phone vibrated. Name not displayed, but the voice was unmistakable. "Dom, it's me. I'm sorry. I know everything you saw was horrible, but I can explain. I just need you to listen. Dom, it's me. I'm sorry. I know everything you saw was horrible, but I can explain. I just need you to listen." Alyssa's voice rang out so softly that Dominic had to hold the phone close to his ear to hear clearly. In the quiet space of the cabin where he used to go to escape all the pressures of life, her gasps sounded like strange beats in his chest. "I saw the photo. I read the message. I saw that storage room," Dominic said slowly, each word like a small knife stab. "Now tell me, Alyssa, what is your real name?" There was such a long silence that it seemed like the other end of the line had hung up. But then she answered. "Alyssa Mercer. That's your real name. You only changed your last name when you accepted the mission. Everything else, everything I know, is real." Dominic did not reply. Outside, the forest was still silent, but inside his heart were a series of swirling winds that could not be stopped. Alyssa continued, her voice now shaking. "My brother Xavier was involved in a military intelligence scandal in 2015. Silas approached me, offering me a deal. I joined the program in exchange for protecting Xavier. I was not allowed to refuse." Dominic closed his eyes. The name Xavier had never been mentioned in the 7 years of living together. A brother who doesn't exist until now. Alyssa seemed to read his mind. "I knew I was wrong. It was wrong not to tell you from the beginning. But I never thought things would go this far. I thought I just needed to complete a few missions and then be allowed to leave. But then, I met you. Everything changed." He strolled towards the kitchen, put the phone on the table, turned on the speaker, then leaned against the refrigerator. "What about last night? Where were you with whom? And why is there a photo of you entering a motel with a man?" Alyssa sighed. "The person in the photo is Caleb, the independent agent I hired to spy on Silas. I intentionally let myself be followed, so that they would think I was betraying me, not Silas. But the plan was revealed. I couldn't come to dinner because if they saw me meeting you, you would be followed immediately, and I hid the evidence in the only place he wouldn't think of." Dominic felt his heart clench. "Where?" Alyssa paused for a moment and then spoke softly. the model of the first building your company designed. The green community center. You know no one can touch it. Not even your employees can dust it. I took the bottom off, hid the USB drive inside. There's everything: transaction lists, names, bank codes, eavesdropping devices. It could all incriminate Silas. Dominic turned to look at the bag he always carried when giving presentations. A part of him screamed, not wanting to believe, that the woman who shared with him every meal, every corner of the house, every late-night kiss, could arrange everything to such an extent. But the other part, the part that loved her uncontrollably, believed it and understood why she had to do it. A knock on the door rang out. Dominic quickly grabbed the phone, pulled out the gun from under the sofa pillow, and walked over to look through the crack in the door. "It's Brooke." Her eyes were cold and her hands were empty. "You should open the door, Dom," she said through the wood, as if she knew he was standing there. Dominic opened the door, keeping the gun low but not letting go. "You just talked to Alyssa," he said, never taking his eyes off the woman before him. Brooke smiled faintly and walked in. "Good. So you know what we need to look for." "How do you know this cabin?" Dominic asked. Brooke stopped, eyebrows raised. "Only two people know. Me and Leo." Dominic froze. Leo, his architectural teacher, helped him renovate this cabin after his uncle died. The man was seriously ill and retired 3 years ago because the cost of treatment was too high. "He was the first person Silas bribed," Brooke said softly. "Everyone has a price, especially when you are in the hospital without insurance." Dominic gasped. "Since when have you been following me long enough to know I won't give up on Alyssa no matter what? And long enough to know I'll try to protect her, even when there's nothing left to believe." Dominic lowered his gun. "So what now?" Brooke looked straight into his eyes. "Now you're going to help me get that USB out. And if you're wise, you should pray that Silas hasn't reached the office yet." The two got into the car that night, driving through the sparsely populated streets leading to Dominic's office. A small glass building in the middle of Chicago's new technology development area. Dominic didn't say anything the whole way. His eyes were glued to the road, but his mind was racing through every moment he and Alyssa created the company together. Every little debate about design. Every evening they ate late at dinner on the office floor, tired but happy. Now that very place could become a battlefield. When they arrived, the lights in the building were still off. There were no signs of anything unusual. Dominic opened the door with his code, then went straight into the display area, where the architectural model was solemnly placed in a glass box. His hands trembled slightly as he removed the glass. He never let anyone touch it. Even Alyssa, the only time she came close, he grumbled that the dust also had a souvenir value. Dominic flipped the bottom of the model over, carefully removing the small layer of wood, then gasped when he saw a flat USB drive wrapped with black tape. "She tried to save me," he muttered like a confession to himself. Brooke quickly took the drive and plugged it into the laptop she brought with her. Her eyes scanned the series of folders that appeared: images, code names, communication logs, even encrypted recordings. "Exactly what we need," she nodded. But before the data could be backed up, a sudden hiss rang out from the ceiling speaker system. Dominic raised his head. Startled, Brooke closed the lid of the machine. And then the voice rang out, cold and clear. "I have to admit, I'm impressed, Dominic. Silas Preston." The name Dominic once thought was a vague figure in the dark, now resounds in the office he designed himself. "I always thought she would betray sooner or later," Silas continued. "But I didn't expect she would bet on you, too. What a Hollywood love story." Dominic turned his eyes to find the source of the sound, but couldn't see the camera. There was only the sound of the rolling door below opening. A group of people walked in, at least 3 armed guys dressed like special forces. "They're here," Brooke said, pulling a gun from her coat pocket and pushing Dominic toward the fire escape. "Go to the rooftop. Quick." Without asking, Dominic led the way through the technical stairs along the narrow, dusty hallway the cleaning staff never went to. He once drew a diagram of this escape route by hand. Now I'm grateful for that. When they reached the roof, the black helicopter was hovering in the distance, red lights scanning every corner. Silas stood at the roof's edge, his long coat flying his appearance opposite to what Dominic had imagined. Not a crazy person. It's someone who looks like a bank manager, polite and cold-blooded. "You can leave here with me," Silas said, as if inviting a partner to sign a contract. "A new safe life. You just have to leave that to me." Dominic stepped forward, holding up the USB drive in his hand. This thing. He held it high, then gave a small smile. "Alyssa once said you can steal everything unless people learn not to be afraid of losing anymore." And at that second, he threw the USB drive into the darkness behind the roof, towards the signal antenna system. A pre-set signal, and as he did so, a series of flashing lights lit up from a distant corner of the sky. Sirens howl. "You just gave the data to the entire federal network," Brooke growled, gun pointed straight at Silas. "It's over." Silas pulled out his gun, but Alyssa appeared from the right corner of the roof. The Glock in her hand went off first. A bullet grazed Silas's shoulder, causing him to kneel. The helicopter pilot immediately retreated. The plane took off vertically and disappeared from range. Dominic didn't look at Silas at that moment. He looked at Alyssa. Her face is now full of tension. Her hair is tangled in the wind. Her eyes are still the eyes he once loved and once doubted. Now there is only steadfastness left. She stood next to him with nothing left to hide. The first dawn after the incident, no sirens, flashing lights, or guns pointed at anyone anymore. There was only soft yellow light streaming through the kitchen window of the small house that Dominic thought he would never return to. He stood in front of the coffee counter in a rumpled t-shirt, watching the light smoke rising from the ceramic cup, his other hand still placed on the tabletop as if needing support. Alyssa was sitting on a wooden chair nearby. Her eyes were dark from lack of sleep, her lips were dry, and her hair still smelled of dust from last night's terrace. But Dominic couldn't take his eyes off her. Not because of looks, but because of silence. A silence that was different from any silence they had ever had before. Not silent because of anger, nor because of being lost. It's because they both know this is the first time they sit together truly being themselves. "I don't know what else to call you," Dominic said, his voice hoarse. "Alyssa Mercer, Alyssa Lawson, or just Alyssa." She smiled slightly for the first time in many days. "Alyssa, you never lied about that name. Everything else has indeed changed, but your name is real." Dominic nodded. Silence for a long moment. "So, what will happen from now on?" Alyssa exhaled slowly, as if it was a question she had been asking herself all night. "The Secret Service said they'd put us in the Witness Protection Program. New name, new place to live, another life, or..." She paused. "Or we can stay, keep ourselves, but accept that there will still be risks. Silas may be caught, but he's not the only one." Dominic put down his cup of coffee. "And what do you want?" Alyssa looked at him. That look, now there's nothing to cover up. No barrier, no role. There's only one woman left who is being honest with the man she once hid from the world. "I want to stay. I don't want to keep hiding. I'm tired. I want to live with the person I chose from the beginning. No programs, no code names, no covers. Just, if you still want that." He walked closer and sat down next to her. They weren't touching, but Dominic could feel her breathing, slow, fragile, and somehow hopeful. "I didn't know anything about you," he said, "and that broke me. But when I think back, what hurt me wasn't because you lied, but because I didn't see how much you were struggling. Alyssa bit her lip, her eyes filled with tears. Every night lying next to you, I'm afraid. Not afraid of being exposed, but afraid that one day you'll look at me with the same eyes as that night, the eyes of someone who no longer believes. Dominic quietly held her hand. Alyssa's hands trembled slightly, but this time she didn't take it back. He pulled a small object from his pocket, a vintage compass, a souvenir forgotten amid all the chaos. He placed it between them as a quiet symbol of all that had been broken and could begin again. I used to think a compass was just something to find my way, but it turns out it's not to show me the way, but to remind me, to always choose the right direction. Alyssa looked at him, tears silently falling down her cheeks. Dominic held her hand gently, pulled the compass towards him and whispered, "I don't need a new name. I don't need a new house. I don't need a new life. Just know. From now on, if we go anywhere, we will go together." She nodded, very softly, but Alyssa Mercer was allowed to lay down her weapon for the first time in her long years of living a double life. Life after that did not change by a miracle. There is no action movie ending where everything is clear and black and white. Once they cross the threshold of truth, people like Dominic and Alyssa cannot return to being the same people. But they learn to live on with everything that had happened. Dominic returns to the office. Not to run the company, but to clean up and return each brick to its rightful place. He told his staff that he would take a break. There were no big announcements, no romantic goodbyes. One word, thank you for believing in me even when I didn't know who I was. Alyssa is still Alyssa. She doesn't use a fake name anymore. There are no other surnames. There's no more reason to hide. She went with him to the miniature model repair shop where they both took the old compass to be replated. Not for use, but to remind that if they get lost again one day, at least they have learned to find each other in the midst of chaos. Someone asked Dominic, "After all, do you still believe in love?" He just laughed, then answered, "Love is not always as clean and clear as we think. Sometimes it's messy, full of scratches, full of questions. But if there's anything that makes me believe it's this real love, doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to choose not to leave when things are at their ugliest." Dear friend, perhaps you have loved someone but didn't know who they were until the end. Maybe you've been in so much pain that you thought you couldn't forgive. But you know what? The truth sometimes doesn't come to break, but to give us a chance to start again truly. Not with anyone else, but to the people we once thought were lost. If you have watched this far, I want to ask you something. Have you ever forgiven someone, even though they hurt you so much that you thought you couldn't lift your head? Or are you still waiting for someone to tell the truth for the first time without hiding? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if this story touches something in you, please click register so that every week we tell another journey like this, not perfect but real, not flashy but enough to believe. Because sometimes it's the quietest things that keep people from falling.